Disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowances made for fair use for purpose such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statutes that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips in the balance of the favor of fair use. Furthermore, I give credit to the original copyright owner. I don't own the rights, or no infringement is intended to the material that has been added to this original content. Welcome to Blended Healing, Episode 3. I love you. Nah, I'm infatuated. No, are you going to leave? So we're going to be continuing talking about this new buzzword called anxious attachment. Anxious attachment, where we left off at. Just to remind you that anxious attachment is, and particularly in a relationship, can be difficult to understand and to manage. However, the awareness of how this attachment style develops and plays out in a relationship can help anxious attachers and their partners reach a more healthy and secure relationship. And where we left off at was we were getting ready to discuss how the anxious attachment style forms, what anxious attachment style relationships may look like, how to have a healthy relationship with anxious attachment, and how to love someone who has anxious attachment. Ashe. So let's talk about what causes an anxious attachment style. According to the theory, it states that a bond that a child forms with their caregivers in their early years of life, approximately the first 18 months, influences how they will later approach social interactions and relationships. That's why it's so important to nourish and love on your child, because a lot of these things that we go through as an adult rears its head from childhood. So a child can develop a secure attachment style in response to caregivers that are attuned and that responds to their needs. Because children understand that their parents or caregivers can be relied upon, and they develop a strong emotional connection with them. And there's a sense of safety within that world. In turn, they are indirectly taught that their needs are important and that people in general can be trusted. But if a child interprets their caregivers or parents' responses to their needs as inconsistent, they may develop an anxious attachment style. The parents or the caregivers of an anxious child may act supportive and attentive to their child's needs on occasion, but other times they are not attuned with that kid and they don't connect with what that child wants or needs. And that child ultimately ends up confused regarding their relationships with their caregivers, right? And these mixed signals make it very difficult for them to make sense of caregivers' action. So it stems back to childhood, which also brings in another facet called shadow healing. On my page, you can go into the spiritual toolbox and you will find a segment on that, on shadow healing. Ashe? Ashe. So, anxiously attached children end up highly confused regarding their caregivers, inconsistent actions. They don't understand and why they change their behaviors from one extreme to the other. Sometimes these things are conflicting actions, and they result in a child struggling to trust their people, right? And as a result of the parent or the caretaker not being consistent with providing that child their needs, they can exhibit separation anxiety and poor emotional regulation and become highly emotionally reactive and seek constant. They want to be around their caregiver a lot. And the child grows up believing that their needs are only important to others when it's convenient. I hope that hits home. Let me say that one more time. If the child grows up believing that their needs are only important to others when it's convenient. So when they become adults, they find themselves in relationships that mirror that childhood dynamic, where love and affection are only given conditionally as these behaviors were normalized at a young age. Ashe, Ashe. We're talking about anxious attachment today on this segment. And what we're learning together is that this stems from childhood, which most shadow healing or most behavior actions stem from. Ashe? I want you to be cognizant of that for those of you who are caregivers of children. If you miss that first 18-month period, you better step up your game and step in and do what you got to do before that child develops any type of behavioral problem. I'm not going to call it a problem. I'm going to call it a different behavioral aspects that could have been avoided if they just would have received what they needed. But I do understand that most of us, and I'm talking about us as adults in 101 class, were incapable of providing that. And there's no shame, no harm, no judgment zone, because there's always a backstory for the reason of why. I'm just saying, and I'm speaking to the adult now. If you have children, correct that shit. Because what they're going to do is end up resenting you as they grow up. And you're going to feel what they felt. And I would hate to see that separation between parent, caregiver, and the child. Talk about what is anxious attachment and what does it mean in a relationship? What does it mean? So even though you may have romantic connections, right? And with someone, and that has this anxious attachment style. that typically craves that you have to still find relationships. Reverse that. People with anxious attachment relationships, I'm getting my words jumbled, means that they are typically craving and they still find the relationships that they're in with a person of interest or a partner stressful and very anxiety inducing because anxious attachers are highly attuned to their partners or their person of interest needs and are usually happy to cater to them. But due to their own insecurities and doubts about their self worth, they often project their uncertainty about themselves onto the partner's behaviors. If the anxious attacher's partner fails to respond to their needs in the way that they require them to, then the anxious attacher perceives this as a confirmation of the fact that they are not worthy of love. So, in many ways, relationships for them are both poison and can also be a cure for someone who suffers with this anxious attachment. So, let's talk about it from the poison side, okay? The anxious attacher person of interest, right, or partner is deeply fearful of being rejected or abandoned. They fear, all right? Their fear leads them to act like super sensitive and just watching so close towards any potential threat to that relationship they're in, right? And they're constantly requiring validation and confirmation that their partner or their person of interest loves them. But on the other hand, being in the company of those loved ones makes someone with an anxious attachment style feel comforted and soothed. And that's their cure. So, what are some of the things to tell or how you can tell if someone has anxious attachments in a relationship? So, if you're wondering whether you or your person of interest or partner has an anxious attachment style, the signs are as follows: being attuned and sensitive to your partner's needs, prioritizing the needs of a partner over your own, seeking validation and assurance that you are loved, worthy, and good enough, being super watchful towards any threats to that relationship, fear of rejection and abandonment, jealousy, and suspicion of your partner or person of interest actions, clinginess, and poor sense of boundaries, difficulty expressing or understanding your intense emotions, and excessive anxiety or worry. Inevitably, anxious attachment relationship issues can be destructive to one's love life because the traits of this attachment style can even trigger avoiding strategies. They don't want to hear shit. They don't want to know shit. Stay away from me. Don't tell me because I'm scared that you're going to leave me. So I'm going to start withdrawing a little bit. But then I'm going to pass that energy over to you. Know what I mean? So those are the things that you need to talk about and watch out for, all right? Just be aware of it. Even if it's you, this is an awareness wake up call. You feel me? Feel me? So when we come back, we're going to talk about why do they behave the way that they do. Ashe, Ashe. Let's find out. Deep down, someone with anxious attachment style believes that as soon as their person of interest get to know the real them, they'll lose interest and reject them. Ultimately, the anxious attacher's low self-esteem causes them to think that they're not good enough to keep a partner's interest in the long run. But I need you to remember that the reason why someone with anxious attachment style thinks and acts the way that they do is rooted in their childhood. We talked about that. The way their desire for affection and intimacy was met in their formative years taught them that both themselves and their needs were unimportant. Therefore, they expect that this pattern will continue in their romantic relationships, so they do everything in their power to prevent it. They need to be able to form healthy relationships, right? Because the patterns of attachment anxiety are so ingrained in their makeup that it can be challenging to know how to manage the anxious attachment style in any type of relationship. So, with understanding and putting in a lot of effort, it is possible to move past their deep rooted fears and insecurities of this attachment style and feel more fulfilled and secure within their romantic relationships, right? Understanding how some of the things that played out or the actions that trigger them and triggers their insecurity can help an anxious attacher figure out how their thoughts and actions are affecting other people and that the aid them when they're putting things together in place to prevent this typical negative response. So, what are some of the typical anxious attachment relationship triggers where they're in different situations of the with their person of interest or their partner? They act distant or aloof, right? They forget important events such as an anniversary. They act too friendly or flirty with someone else. When they come home late or fail to respond to messages or calls, fails to compliment something different, such as new clothes or hairstyles, and cancels a date or a meetup. People with anxious attachment style don't act clingy or needy towards their partner or person of interest all the time. Ashe, Ashe. Any triggers could potentially cause the anxious attacher to feel overwhelmed by worry or fear of rejection. As a result, their attachment system may be triggered and they may respond to the potential threat of their relationship by trying to reestablish as much closeness with their partner or person of interest as possible, worrying excessively and feeling depleted. These behaviors can cause a significant strain on a relationship and potentially even a breakup. Once someone With this attachment style starts to recognize their triggers and how they react to them, they can regulate their responses in healthier ways. Here are some of the things that can help you or somebody that you know overcome their anxious attachment style in romantic relationships. Number one, they need to educate themselves on the four attachment styles. Knowledge of how the different attachment styles are developed. What are the triggers? And can they affect the thoughts and actions that can help someone with the anxious attachment style better understand their own partners or their own patterns of behavior, as well as those of their partner, right? So doing so can help reduce what you know that, may something that may pop off in the relationship, as well as figure out the best way to handle the coping with the anxious attachment style. Number two, try to choose a person with a secure attachment style. So if you choose someone who's secure in who they are, it may be easier said than done, but especially if you're already in a relationship. That being said, your person or the person of interest with secure attachment styles can help an anxious attacher to regulate, to control their emotions more effectively and help them feel more secure in the relationship. And in general, there are a number of self-care traits on the secure attachment style when dating someone new. Number three, communicate, communicate, communicate. Someone with the anxious attachment style may attempt to manage their negative emotions through bursts of anger or jealousy towards their partner or person of interest, or by trying to reestablish closeness by clinging to them. Ugh. Effective communication involves taking a breather between an emotional and an action and expressing why they're feeling frustrated or worried. Creating internal scripts such as, I understand that you may not understand why I'm upset, but here's why I feel anxious. Blank. Or, I know that you didn't intentionally mean to ignore my call, but it made me feel really worried. This may help your partner or your person of interest to understand your anxious attachment perspective without pushing them away. Moreover, you should also attempt to communicate your needs to your partner, as you may be used to prioritizing of their needs as well as the needs of others over your own. You feel me? All right. Let's talk about this a little bit more. Ooh, child, I'm exhausted already. When it comes to number four, try to identify emotions and needs. Anxious attachers often struggle to identify their emotions. Keeping a thought diary or a journal may help unpick some of your feelings and can help you recognize specific patterns in your thoughts and your actions. Also, body mapping, or what I like to call it, body scanning, a meditation where you lay down and you start going down from the top of your head down to your feet, right? And then you just go through your body system slowly, like think of a scan or an MRI where they go down in your system and you can feel where you're feeling the blockage at in your body. You can do that's another method that you can do in order to assist yourself. All right. Number five, don't think about or don't think about not going to therapy. Not everybody can handle or manage these things on their own, right? They need to be able to seek help or support. After all, the patterns of thinking and acting were ingrained in their body before they were able to verbalize their feelings. Effective therapy can help resolve issues from early childhood and current relationships, as well as form a new blueprint for how healthy relationships should function. So we're going to end it there. Obviously, it's going to be a part four because who knew that this anxious attachment segment was going to be so in depth? But I'm so pleased to know that it is because the more you know, the more empowered that you are. I need you to do me a favor. When it comes to this dissecting and getting into step with your emotions and this type of uh, anxious attachment, whether it's you or your person that you're in a relationship or a potential relationship with, they need to do some shadow work so they can start unfolding and processing what happened in their life, in their childhood. And they're going to need a support system to do that. Please make sure that you go onto this platform, go down to Spiritual Toolbox, and get in there and start looking at and doing the work for shadow healing. Promise me that you'll do that, or at least look at it. And if you're not comfortable with me, get with somebody else that you know and trust that can help you through the process of shadow healing and forgiveness. Remember that forgiveness is not about the other person, it's all about you. So you can unstick yourself so you can move forward. Understand? I need you to live the best life that you can. So we will continue this conversation in episode 4 with anxious or anxious attachment. I got to get used to that. The AA, anxious attachment. We were going to be digging a little bit further. I want you to remember that you already have, are over there at Transparent Talk and you have enjoyed the show. I want you to also tap into my sister, Goddessy of Love at the Love Palace at 8 o'clock tonight, Eastern Standard Time. And probably when you're viewing this, it's already in progress. So make sure you go over there, support and subscribe to my sister. Tonight is open mic for poetry, all right, or spoken word, which is very refreshing and new and so helpful. And it's no judgment zone, so you can get up there and do your thing, you know. I want to thank you so much for tuning in and helping me on my road to 500 subscribers. I appreciate everything that you're doing to help a girl out. You know what I mean? I appreciate each and every one of you. And remember that my online botanica will be coming up either towards the end of this month or next month. So be on the lookout for that. All right. And last but not least, I want you to remember that upcoming on January 20th, our friend to the channel, Brenda Clark, will be having a high heel contest on January the 20th. Make sure that you contribute to that cash reward. And that looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And then they're going to have judges and everything over there. So you're going to have a great time. All right. So make sure that you tune into Brenda Clark's high heel contest on January the 20th. Ashe, Ashe. With that being said, in true blended healing fashion, I would love to send you out with this song. Be well, stay safe, and I will see you in episode